Hello, everybody. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Diversity Inclusion Task Force uh, for June 12th, and I would like to ask our town clerk to please take the roll.
Starting with council, Councilmember Ryan.
Here.
Councilmember Nick Farr is absent. Councilmember Wellner is absent. Vice Mayor and Chair Thier.
Here.
Mayor Fredericks.
Here.
And the at-large members, Howie Awash is absent. Karen Carrera is absent. Ruben Calra.
Here.
Nushin Latour. Here. And Tina Shaw Pikeday and Vice Chair.
Okay, so at this point, what I would like to do is move on our agenda to say a very quick welcome to our featured speaker tonight, Jamila Jordan. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a background on her. She is Marin County's Equity Director, and she's a multidisciplinary strategist, an urban planner, and a social justice leader with over 10 years of experience in catalyzing systems change. And she's worked on with a lot of different public and private partners. And in her role as director of Marin County's Office of Equity, she actually works across 22 different agencies and departments to develop, implement, and evaluate strategies that dismantle systemic barriers to enrich the lives of those in the county. Recently, one of her largest accomplishments in Marin County is that she led the development of the county's race equity action plan and the county's first ever race equity budget tool. So part of the reason that I invited her to come to speak to us is to give us background on what Marin County is doing, and also to talk about the race equity budget tool, because it sounded super interesting. She's also a big cultural health leader through the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And she's done so many things. I can't even list them all. But I really wanted this task force to be able to benefit from what the county's doing and to give us ideas and vice versa. So, I just want to say that she's made a huge difference here in Marin County, and she's really worked to create better outcomes for everyone, but especially communities of color, and we want to thank her for that. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to Jamila Jordan, and she's going to do a presentation, and then there'll be time for questions and maybe a little bit of an exchange. Members can talk about what this task force has done as well. I know she wanted to hear about that. So, and I want to recognize Howie. Hi. Okay, go.
All right. Thank you so much, Holly. Great to be here, everyone. My name is Jamila Jordan, and I am the director of the Office of Equity for Marin County. I'm going to stand up. I've been sitting all day, been in meetings all day. So hopefully you all are doing well, and really appreciate the invitation from our chair here to come and talk to you a little bit about what we're doing in the county of Marin around equity work, and hopefully to have some conversation around how we can work together. Ideally, okay? So that's what we want to cover today. I put together really just a high-level presentation for us to step through together. We can hold questions towards the end if that's okay, and then just jump on in that way. So let's go ahead and get started. So this is our small but mighty Office of Equity team. It includes myself and 3 of my colleagues here, and we are in charge of helping to make the county an anti-racist, multicultural workforce that's committed to accountability, to community engagement, and to transformational change. And so how do we define equity? I think this is such an important part of the work, is having a shared vocabulary, a shared sense of language around some of these topics. And so I like to just share how we define equity in the county of Marin. And this is from Policy Link, which is a think tank here in the Bay Area. If you don't know them, they're really worth checking out. But basically, equity is the just and fair inclusion in society where everyone can participate, they can prosper, and they can reach their full potential. Okay, and I like this definition because I feel like it's fairly accessible for people. There are lots of other ways to think about it, but in general, it's about just and fair inclusion into society. So why are we doing this work? I think for one, we want everyone to thrive here in Marin County. That's a big part of the push and the sense of urgency around equity work. And then we also have found, due to some recent studies and research that's been done, that Marin County is currently the third most racially disparate county in all of California. Okay, and I know this may not be news to some of you, to others it might be. This is a small but modest improvement from when we were number one just a few years ago. We went from number one to number two, and now we're number three. So our work is cut out for us. But basically, this study really invited our Board of Supervisors, our community members, to think really critically about what we're doing to address racialized disparities here in our county. I'm talking about where you live, where you work, where you play, and where you pray. Everyone isn't thriving in this county for a variety of reasons. And so we wanted to unpack and really get to the heart of that. And then what are our solutions or strategies to address some of these seemingly intractable challenges? I also would call out the COVID-19 pandemic, which really exacerbated a lot of the inequities that folks knew about already. And it showed an amplified sense of vulnerability, primarily for our lower income communities and our communities of color. And so this is the context, this is the backdrop with which I do a lot of my work in terms of people understanding the why of this work and the urgency behind it. So what do we do in the county? We take an intersectional approach. Have you all heard that term, intersectionality? Not, no, some of us haven't. Okay, well, basically everyone, intersections make up all of our various dimensions of identity, whether that be age, whether it be race, whether it be gender, education level, disability, sexual orientation. All of these things make us who we are. And what we found is that when we lead with race, we have the greatest impact on all marginalized communities. Okay, I'm going to say that in a little bit of a different way. What we know to be true is that race is the single most important predictor of your life outcomes, right? And that's if you control for education, if you control for wealth, right? No matter what, your race is really going to determine your life outcomes in a lot of ways. And that's sad but true. And so we have to take a really close look. To not do so would be just a glaring omission, and I think it would be irresponsible of us as public servants. And so with that in mind, everybody, we wanted to focus in on where the needs were the greatest. And what we found is that our communities of color, our lower income communities, our immigrant communities, those are the communities that really need a lot more of our attention, our love, and our resources at this point in time. And so we're shifting the way we do business in the county of Marin to really lead with race. And although we're leading with it, it's not the end of the story. We take into account age. We know that Marin County has 30% of our population is over 60, over 65, I believe, in fact, right? We also think about the fact that we have people of a variety of different disabilities that exist in this county. So some people say, well, why do you want to lead with race? Why race, Jamila? Why are we doing that? Well, one, I just told you about the disparities that exist. Third highest racial disparities in all of the state. But I think also, and I mentioned this a moment ago, is that when we lead with race, all boats rise. And that's really our goal, is to make sure that everyone is better off. And so that's why we're focusing our efforts on where the needs are the greatest right now. I share this with you all, and hopefully you have some handouts with you. You can peruse it later. But I share this because our chair asked me to just share a little bit about what our approach is in Marin County. And so this is our framework for racial equity change work. You could also say equity change work, right? It's all the same essentially. But what we start with is this normalized piece on the right. And that's part of what I did when I shared that definition with you. It's normalizing the conversation. Do we have a shared vocabulary? Do we have a shared analysis of why this work is so important? The second piece that you see at the bottom there is about organizing, right? How do we build teams, build people who want to do this work, to build their capacity? Like all of you in this inclusion task force, you're an important part of why I came here today, is because I consider you to be my partners in this work. So this is a form of organizing that you all are doing and me coming here today. The last piece that I'll call out is operationalize. How do we do this thing called equity work? What are the tools that are available to us? What are the frameworks? What are the policies that help us really embed equity in our local governments? So this is our change process of how we can go from the third most racially disparate to way, way, way down the list, ideally. Okay. So this is a slide with a lot of words, but I shared this. I wanted to include it because I hope that someone at some point will share a little bit about you all and your work as the task force, what you're all about, what are your initiatives that you're focused on, and maybe some of the challenges that you might be butting up against a little bit. Okay. And so some of the challenges that I've mentioned here is one, uncertainty. How do I do this, right? We're all learning how to do this work. It's an emerging field of practice. So there's just some general apprehension around not knowing what exactly to do. Okay. Another thing that we find is a lack of political will may exist as well in certain communities. Okay. How do we change behavior is a big part of the conversation as well. And then what policy changes do we want to start to think about? So these are some of the things that really get people hung up in this work, okay? And rightfully so. These are big time questions and prompts here. And then on the right there, what I show you are some strategies of how we're addressing it in Marin County. So I'm going to talk a little bit about more of that later in our slides. So there's three particular things that I want to call out to you today. This is just a snapshot of what we're doing in the county. I didn't have a ton of time to talk with you tonight, and so we might come back at another time if you'd be so gracious as to invite me. But I wanted to just share a couple of the key initiatives that we're working on in the county. The first is our Race Equity Action Plan, which we use the acronym REAP for short. And basically, the board allocated $1.7 million for us to come up with an approach for how do we address the fact that we have the third highest number of racialized disparities in our county. What can we do to address that? How do we meet those needs and fill those gaps? And so we put together a team primarily of community members from across the county. Our youngest member was under 17. Our oldest was over 80. They came from all different parts of the county. And then we also invited community nonprofits to join as well. So you see some of the groups there: Legal Aid of Marin, Canal Alliance, Community Action Marin, the Workforce Alliance of the North Bay. And then we also invited jurisdictions just like all of you here today. So some of our partners were City of San Rafael, City of Novato, Port of Madera, you name it, we wanted folks to be involved in this work. And so we came up with a plan to address racialized disparities. And we focused in on these three key pillars that you see on the slide here. One is mental health, right? Economic opportunity, and the other is housing. And so if you haven't had a chance to check out our plan, I really encourage you to take a look at it and see where is it that you all see yourself factoring into that work. Are there particular strategies or goals or actions in that document that you really identify with and you want to partner with the county on? If so, give me a shout and I'd love to talk with you about it. Some of the things that they came up with was one, raising the minimum wage. Right? So that's a big part of economic opportunity. Another was around micro enterprise businesses, right? So helping our low income, primarily small business entrepreneurs, how do they get the capital? How do they get the technical assistance to be successful? So that's one of some of the things we're doing in economic opportunity. For housing, we're looking at rent stabilization, right? Another word for that is rent control. Right, that's some of the things that the group came up with as really important for them to address the displacement that's happening in the county. Another one is community land trust is another action under our housing pillar there. And then mental health is another one as well. So we spread out the $1.7 million across these three pillars, across those actions that I just told you about. And now we're implementing, right? So this is a really exciting part of the work. And when you think about that circle I showed you a moment ago, it's really now we're at operationalizing is what we're doing. Okay, so that's really what the plan is about. It's about moving from discussion into action. All right, so quickly, I want to just tell you a little bit about our participatory budgeting process. How many of you all have heard of it before? Any of you? Yeah, a couple folks? All right, all right. I remember you. So we call it PB for short. You'll hear lots of acronyms, but it's a long, long phrase there. So we call it PB for short. And basically what it is a democratic process where community members, just like you, sir, in the audience, help to decide how to spend part of a public budget. Okay, so we're placing power directly in the hands of community members through this PB process. And our board allocated $2.5 million for community members to decide how to spend it. And we wanted to focus in, and again, we wanted to focus on communities where the needs were the greatest. That's a big part of our approach in the county. And so where did we find the needs? We found them in parts of Novato, West Marin, broadly speaking, Marin City, and the Canal. So we're focusing our resources on those communities. And what we did is we invited community members to come up with ideas of how they would spend this money to advance racial equity. What do you think they said? What do you think they talked about? Chair, can I ask you, what do you think they talked about? Transportation. That was a big one. That was so many community members talked about, particularly in West Marin. We heard a lot about the needs to address rural transportation issues, right? So that's just one idea, that's one that they came up with. So we got hundreds of projects were submitted, and we gave out grants of $10,000 to $250,000 for them to make those grant ideas a reality. And we wanted to get out the vote, very much like you all do when you are pounding the pavement and inviting people to vote for you. And so people could vote in person or online as long as they were 14 years of age or older. We wanted to engage the youth vote in this, right? And so it was really fantastic. We got over nearly 4,000 some odd votes from community members for their projects. This is just a snapshot of some of the projects that eventually got funding. So you see one is around re-entry. For folks who just got out of jail or prison, it's often really challenging to reintegrate back into society, to get a job, to find a place to live, to go back to school. And so this program, they put up an idea that was about re-entry services for people who just got out of jail or prison. Another one you see there is a Canal Culture of Excellence, which is all about enriching the lives of children through music. Right? That was one of their ideas. So this is just a snapshot of some of the winning projects, but I share it as I hope is an inspiring example of what we can do when community members, when community members are trusted to make their own decisions. All right, so I'm going to fast forward here. And then just quickly, I want to talk to you about some of our internal work. So what I mentioned to you just a moment ago, those were community-facing projects. So our work is both internal within the county and then also external within communities. And so I just wanted to pause for a moment and talk to you very briefly about our internal work here in the county of Marin. And I heard our chair talk about the race equity budget tool as one really exciting example of what we're doing. And what this tool is designed to do is to help our departments think really critically about who's being burdened and who's benefiting from our funding decisions, from our resource allocations, right? So rather than us just going about it the way we've always done it, we'll get the same results as we have always gotten, but instead we're challenging our departments to think a little bit differently. What is your role in advancing equity if you work within a county department? So we gave them a set of guiding questions to think about. We gave them some data that's disaggregated by race, by gender, by geography, to help them make more informed decisions. And I think that this is really the critical thinking piece that we're doing differently in the county, is we're inviting our staff to think differently about the way they go about their work. The last one I wanted to mention, and this is just one, I was looking through your previous agendas, and I'd love to hear more about your work, as I said, but I was looking through your previous agendas, and I saw that BioSync was on something that you all have been working on. And so I just wanted to share a little bit about our approach to training and capacity building in the county. And so we right now, that's that last bullet, we're working on what we're calling a DEIB learning plan. Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Learning Plan. We're gonna change that name, just so you know, but this is all about how do we train staff at all levels of government, from those who sit where you all are sitting to the folks who are delivering frontline services, essential services. How do we make sure that everybody has some of these critical thinking skills around equity, that they have a shared sense of vocabulary around these topics? And not only do they understand it conceptually from a knowledge standpoint of, I understand what this term means, but we're asking them now to pivot into, I can apply that knowledge into my work. And that's the gap that we notice, is that there was some intellectual understanding of these concepts, but the practice piece is where our teams were falling a bit short. And so we hope that through this capacity building training, through things like the race equity budget tool, that we help people bridge the gap between knowledge and application of that knowledge in their work. Does that make sense to you all? All right. So I'm going to start to wrap it up here. I think you all have other things on the agenda, but I just quickly wanted to share with this training piece, we have gotten our Board of Supervisors to declare equity as a priority. It's one of their top priorities for the next 5 years, let's say. And they said this is important. And so staff hear that feedback, they hear that message. And they also are saying to us, now what? I know it's a priority, but how do I do it? How do I change the way I've been doing things for the last 20 years? Right? And so we're supporting them in these conversations. We're normalizing these conversations, just like you all are doing by having me here tonight. We're talking about these things, right? It's not bad to say race equity. It's not bad to say disparity. It's important for us to talk about it and to name it. So that's part of what we're doing. And ultimately, and I'll close with this, what we really hope to do is improve service delivery. So as a result of someone, let's say a staffer who works at the front desk of customer service of Department of Public Works, just for example. And what we hope is that by virtue of these trainings, of these capacity building opportunities, that they're able to really think about what's their role. If they sit at that front desk of that counter, what can they do to advance equity from wherever they sit? And how do they make these small but important changes in the way they go about their work? So that's our big goal with these types of trainings and things. So I'd love to hear more about BiasSync. We've done BiasSync in the county as well. We're thinking about a slightly different approach through this learning plan, but would love to hear about some of your experience. So I'm going to wrap it up here, folks. But I did just have a couple of questions. One, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you all are doing in this work and field of equity. What's the progress been like? How would you characterize the work here in Tiburon? The other question I have for you is, how can we collaborate? What do you think, what would make sense? What would be helpful for not only you all, but and I can share some things that would be helpful from the county perspective. And then lastly, I know I shared quite a few things here, so we'd just love to hear any questions, ideas, feedback that you may have. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you so much. That was so fantastic. I think we're gonna have to have follow-up time because I don't think we have enough time. I'm gonna ask our members now to introduce themselves quickly, but also, I know you focused a little on training and you had a specific training question, so I do want to turn it first over to our vice chair, who is doing the training piece and also is a, professional in this industry. So she does a lot of diversity work every day.
Hi, Tina Pikeday. It's nice to meet you. Thank you so much for the presentation. I did read the full report and was very impressed by the comprehensiveness of the plan that you've put together and how you're executing against it. With regards to BiasSync, you'll hear, hopefully you can stay with us, an update from our town manager, Greg Chanis, about where we are in that process. We're very much at the beginning of the learning process. This task force was formed just a couple of years ago, I think 4 in total. And part of what we've been working on is building a strategic plan that's very specific to the needs of this town. As I look at the 3 pillars that you have outlined, I think that probably we're in a different place of maturity on what we need to do with respect to diversity, equity, inclusion. And then the last thing I'll say is just to elaborate on your first question, which is progress of equity work. I wasn't part of the formation of this committee, but that word was, I think, intentionally left out. And my curiosity, right, just having led this work professionally for a couple of decades in the private sector, is the definition of equity can be quite different in the public versus private sector. leveling the playing field versus making sure that everyone, has the chance to achieve their full potential. How did you go about deciding, more towards the latter end, and the anti-racist approach would be the question I'd have back to you as we might consider equity in the future.
Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Go ahead. I'm just gonna go down yeah.
This is working? Okay. Hi, my name is Nushin Latour. I joined this team about a year ago. I had attended the Diwali event just put on Main Street with my kids, and it was a beautiful event of people from all over Marin in Tiburon. I've been in Tiburon for 10.5 years and I had never seen that before. And then I read up on who put on the event and they happened to have a seat open, and I just felt like that was just a great touch point to the community. And I felt like there needs to be more of that in Tiburon, and it's happening. And I think the town council has been really supportive of it, but also I'm learning from all the team members here as well, and like what they've been doing before I joined. And then now we have new people. So it's just, I feel like we're ripe for a lot of new projects and direction too. Thank you.
Great. And my name's Holly Thier, and I'm chair of the task force. I think that, Tiburon is kind of doing amazing work. This task force kind of came out of a situation that I think we're going to talk about later. But, we were able to move forward and try to really address the issues in Tiburon with racial diversity, equity, and I don't think it was left out intentionally. But the task force has really done a lot. We've put on multiple events. We've created a strategic plan. The town council was one of the first in Marin to have a diversity element. We made a whole element in our general plan, and that the task force worked on that as well. Our police department has done a lot of bias training, and I believe our town manager is going to report on what the town will be doing with respect to bias sync as well. Also, I'm just very proud of everything we've accomplished so far. We are a young task force, and I wish we had 2 hours with you because I have so many questions for you. But I'm gonna hold them because I want everyone to get an opportunity to introduce themselves and say whatever they want. So thank you for being here as well.
So I'm Alice Feathers. I'm serving my 5th term, not consecutive, as mayor of the town. And I can tell you that at a government level, we're a teeny little town. We're not a full service town. Our opportunities to make sweeping changes, from my point of view, are important, but they're not as important as giving the community a chance to define what the problem is, talk about what they think the solutions are, and just have an opportunity to interact with each other. I was raised in Hawaii. All that kind of information and education came from my family, came from my friends' families, including one friend of mine's mother who kept saying when I would say something that was offensive inadvertently, I'm going to slap you upside your head. That sounds horrible, but actually we want people to have that kind of comfort with each other so we can go ahead and do something that's creative, that they all buy into, that affects all of us in our government. And those are my priorities for working on a particular task. We work here. My background is a behavioral psychologist. I'm also a lawyer. So it's an interesting task for me in these tools too.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm Jack Ryan. I'm on the council. I've been on the council since 2020. And I just want to say thank you so much for bringing this. It's super interesting. And I'm really curious to stay abreast of sort of how these things are playing out, particularly the grants that you've deployed. I'd love to hear how those are coming to fruition in terms of making the impact that you hope. So thank you for presenting to us.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to reiterate that from Jack. It's an amazing presentation. I'm sure I'm gonna have more questions for you after. Ruben Collar, I live out in Belvedere, medical doctor. So I do have discussions on in the world of chronic pain management and health equity, and we can talk about it offline, like Spanish hystericus and other things like, inequity of perceiving patients' pain based on their the color of their skin. But I like to be the jovial celebratory man. So I throw a lot of events for the community. So I think getting excited about throwing the 4th of Juneteenth celebration this Saturday.
Mhm.
We've done Diwali, another Diwali, and I think if you ask, I think a lot of people are pretty impressed about the progress I think Tiburon's made with diversity, equity, inclusion. I mean, people are like, "Wow, you guys are throwing a lot of parties. You guys are welcoming a lot of people," and I think it may be slower than we all think it takes, but it's headed in the right direction. I think people are happy about it, and we're putting some more teeth into some of the bigger issues like bias and strategic plan and training. But overall, I would say pretty happy overall, and love to chat afterwards about certain things you're doing and how to gauge like specific metrics to gauge if we're actually making progress. So
I just want to give a big shout out to Ruben. He is doing so much work on not only the events, but keeping us focused here on the task force. And, the work that he's doing right now, I'm just going to call out for Juneteenth because it is our 4th Juneteenth, and we were the first city or town outside of Marin City to do a Juneteenth. So I'm pretty proud of that, and I'm proud of everyone here who's worked continually on it. And I'm not trying to leave anyone out because it's a team effort on this task force. Go ahead, Howie, our wonderful Howie.
Thank you. That's so sweet. Thank you so much for the presentation. My name is Howie Awash. I am the co-founder of Yema in downtown Tiburon. And I just joined the task force. This is my 2nd time attending the meeting, so I'm fairly new to the task force. But I have been following very closely to see what the town has been doing, and I do want to say I am proud. I feel like the town has actively been trying to create change. And I think they've kind of done a good job of putting together different events, promoting diversity and that kind of thing, and also making sure that, we are a welcoming town, and we're not necessarily racially profiling people and forcing them to leave town as soon as they come in. So I think we've done a good job in doing some work alongside that. I am curious to find out when you said, you're thinking about ways that we can collaborate. I am really interested in hearing some of your ideas on what that might look like, especially when it comes to housing, when it comes to definitely, access to employment. As a business owner, some of the things that I'm constantly thinking about is, funding for business owners that do have a small business venture and how that looks like in Marin, and if there are opportunities, what that may look like. So yeah, thank you so much for the time.
Thank you.
One more comment. So this is the third time
Mm.
without but what I'm really interested in when you talk about broadly, and you can understand my background and where I am, one of the most convincing concepts you can talk about, especially when you're going out for money to fund various projects, is operationalizing, but operationalizing also includes measurements. And in order to do that, you have to decide what your measurement is going to be and how it relates to your goals. That's such a complicated process. When and how do we collaborate with you on something big like that? You've gone far down the road, but we're still huffing and puffing and you're still moving.
That's a great question. Are we open to take the respond, or should we? Is that all right? Okay. Well, we'll go fast here. So I'll start with your question and then I'll work my way around. I'm gonna stand up again. So I think that's a great question, first of all, Mayor. And so one of the things that we're doing, particularly in the Race Equity Action Plan that I mentioned, it comes with a set of metrics and performance measures that we're using to evaluate our progress. And so just know that exists, right? And we use the SMART framework, the specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound. That's the SMART framework is what we call it. And so we use that to come up with a set of metrics for us to measure how are we progressing with some of those actions. Now, that being said, It's hard. I'm not going to tell you any untruths here. I think that this is an emerging field of practice. One of the key things is getting a stable source of data that we could all use, right? And it depends on what you're talking about. For economic opportunity, there are different data sources than from housing. There are different data sources than from mental health, right? And so one of the things that we found is a real need to have experts in the room, data specialists, right, who can really help all of us better understand how to do this work, because it's a field of expertise. You can't just wing it when it comes to measuring data, right? And so I think that's just a growing area for us as a county to really build our capacity in, is to have people who specialize in it, right? But in the absence of that, is to partner with community members for them to say, this is what's important for you to measure, Jamila. Okay, how do you come up with a way to do that? Because we can really measure anything, but we want to measure what matters. And that's the important thing for us. And we also don't want to be the sole deciders of what matters, right? Of what matters. And so we're looking to community members to help us in that journey. And so what you see in that REAP document, that Race Equity Action Plan, those were community determined performance measures. They said, this is what you need to be focusing on. This is what you need to move the needle on to determine your impact. So long story short, I think it's a growing field of practice. It's one that requires a lot of conversation, a lot of scaffolding of the data. And then there's also the maintaining of the data piece, right? Oftentimes you get this really great data source. Who's updating that? Who's regularly checking it? Or how are we doing, right? So I just think it's a much bigger conversation, and one that I'd love to come back and discuss. I'm going to come over to this way here, Howie. Am I saying that right? Howie, okay, Howie. And so you asked about, in particular, the small business grants, right? And kind of just what our work is around economic opportunity. I'd love for you to get in touch with the SBDC, the Small Business Development Corporation, if you haven't already. And so that's one of our key partners for that economic opportunity work that I mentioned. And I think there's so many opportunities here in the county that people just aren't aware of, right? And so rather than us come up with a whole new program to support small businesses, we really wanted to connect people to what already exists and better understand, why aren't they going to, for example, SBDC to tap into those grants? What's missing from that program? There's a reason why people aren't tapping into it. So that's part of what we're trying to understand. Does it need to be more culturally appropriate, more culturally responsive? Is it a language barrier in mind? What are the reasons why they're not tapping into some of these services, and how can we bridge that gap, right? So a big part of this plan is connecting people to what already exists. Okay. The other thing you asked me about was around how can we collaborate? I think a couple of people touched on this a little bit. I think there are lots of ways. I would start by just encouraging you all, again, to take a look at that Race Equity Action Plan and see what in there resonates with you. What do you connect with? How do any of those issues in that plan tap into what's going on here in Tiburon, right? Are they the same issues? I feel like housing is an issue no matter where you go. Right? Economic opportunity is an issue no matter where you go. So maybe take a look at that and see if anything speaks to you in that plan. And then let's have a conversation about how to move it forward. Another way I could see us collaborating is through our participatory budgeting grants that I mentioned. And you had asked about this too, Jack. And I think that, we focused in on those 4 communities that I mentioned, but we want to broaden that across the county, right? Just because we're in Tiburon doesn't mean you don't have communities of need here. Doesn't mean that people are not thriving in this community just because it has a certain name, right? So we want to make sure that this is something that everyone can tap into. So as we think about our next cycle of PB, this is the first time we've ever done this in the county, I should also say. So a lot of the work that I'm describing to you is built from the ground up. We're doing it, we're making that train, or what is that expression? You make the plane as you fly it, right? And so, so I just want to just get a little grace around that. A lot of these things are brand new. We're building the infrastructure as we speak, and participatory budgeting is one example of that. And so as you all have ideas or thoughts about how we could refine our approach for cycle 2, how we can better involve Tiburon residents and community members, let's talk about that. Okay, because we're very much open and collaborative in the spirit of that. And then I think the other piece is, how do we connect community members to this work of equity? and I think you all kind of touched on it a little bit in your responses, is that you all seem to be going the route of community events is a great way to, one, get people in a fairly innocuous way, in an accessible way. People come out on a lovely day and come to a Juneteenth festival, right? That's a great way for people to tap into this idea of equity without even knowing that we're talking about equity, right? And so I think that there's more opportunity to connect people to learning opportunities, to experiential opportunities, to walk in the shoes of somebody else in this community, right? So these events is one way, and we could help you all spread the word around that. So those are just some initial thoughts that I have about how we can work together. But again, I really want to hear from you all, as I think about this, because you are the experts of your own community. I'm gonna move it on this way here, and I'm gonna come to you there, Tina. You asked about, in particular, and I'm just looking at my notes here, how did we get to this idea of using equity as opposed to diversity, or focusing on anti-racism as opposed to, say, inclusion, right? And so I think for us, it was really about the data. It was about, to your question, it was about what was the data telling us? And the data was telling us that we were woefully inadequate in serving communities of color in this county, right? The data was telling us that the life expectancy of someone in Marin City is 15 years less than someone who lives in Ross, speaking to my doctor friend here, right? So the data was telling us, you need to lead with race. You need to have an anti-racist lens. Otherwise, what are we doing? Okay, we're just repeating the same cycle. So a lot of it was predicated on, one, what the data was telling us, but then also having our ear to the community and them saying to us, this is what you need to be focusing on, right? So a lot of our work is about co-creating, co-designing with community members, and really listening and acting in accordance with what we've heard. So those are some of the things that really moved us in the direction that we're going. And I feel like there may have been a couple of other questions, and if I'm bumping up against time, let me know. Okay, maybe there was one other question here, maybe not, I'm not sure, but if there are, let me know.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Yeah. So right now, we're gonna go to the special meeting and try to do this in 5 minutes. Ruben has, it's an action item. It is the Tiburon Jewish Festival. Consider making a recommendation to the town council on an $8,000 contribution to the Tiburon Jewish Festival. Ruben, could you take it away?
Yeah, so I think the rabbi came to talk to us a couple of months about the festival coming up, and it is approaching. And he has a great event planned at Zelensky Park Sunday, July 21st. And it's basically, the purpose is to organize a community-wide event aimed at fostering cultural awareness and education about the Jewish community and its rich heritage. And they have an estimated budget of $15,000. They're looking to raise $7,000 and asking the city of Tiburon for $8,000. He wanted to know if we would support the $8,000 and see if we can support that as a team. I'm not the accountant for the team, but I know so far, I think the Asian American Island Festival was under budget. And the good news is Tiburon, because of some nice donations for Juneteenth, may actually come on budget. So I think there might be adequate funds, but I'm going to defer to Greg and the accountants. But I do think there's enough in the budget for this event and the other ones for the fiscal year.
Okay, and I did not take public comment on the last agenda item, so I need to do that really quickly. Is there anyone online who wanted to speak, Lee?
Seeing none.
Okay, and is there anyone in the house that would like, okay. I will take this back to our task force, and I will make a motion to approve the contribution toward the Tiburon Jewish Festival and placement on it has to be on the June 19th agenda, I believe. So I would make that motion, and do I have a second? And then we'll have discussion.
Right, I believe the motion is to make the recommendation.
Just before we move on, Chair, I do have a hand raised in the audience now. I imagine it might be public comment for this item.
Okay,
Can
we will get to that. I'm right after the second, I think. Is there a second?
Oh, second.
Okay, now we'll take public comment and then we'll have discussion.
Hi, Hey, it's Francisco Martinez from the ARC. I think it's more of a point of order remark. Just given that this is a special meeting taking place, I'm just kind of curious as to the regular, then going into the special, and then I assume going back into the regular meeting. I just want to kind of confirm just whether point of order process on that, if that makes any sense, because I think there's still other stuff on the regular meeting agenda item. That's all.
I can only hear every third word. I think you're asking about the process of going into the special. So the reason why that was done is the special meeting is noticed at 5:15 and we are actually over the time. So we went into the special meeting and then we're going back to the regular meeting.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that, that, yeah, the process was just interesting. Yeah, it's Francisco. I'm kind of stuck, exposed to COVID, which is why I'm talking on Zoom. So I just want to make sure that was still in line with it. Thanks.
Yes, and it was just done because we have a time specific on the special meeting and we're late. But we'll be going right back into the general meeting. Any more public comment?
Seeing none.
Okay, and is there any discussion on the council?
On the comment or the motion?
The motion.
And just to clarify, it is a motion to recommend to the town council, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, if I
I
didn't
would
say
second
that. Okay, the motion has been made and seconded. Is there discussion?
I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
Okay. Just wanted to ask, we did allocate a specific amount of $40,000 for each fiscal year in our strategic plan for events, whether there's a read on the current budget spend for events?
Yeah, let me just give you a quick summary. So in the current fiscal year, which is about to end, June 30th, the original budget was $20,000. The council task force members here, as well as council members, may recall there have been a series of small budget amendments made, which have raised that budget to about 26,000 and some change. As of today, we've spent $21,000 out of this current year's budget, and we still have the Juneteenth event. So we'll probably go over budget a little bit this year. The event that you're discussing funding now is actually next fiscal year because it occurs in July. Council will be considering approval of the next fiscal year's budget next Wednesday, and that budget includes a line item for the task force of $40,000. So this would be the first expenditure out of that budget.
Okay, so it sounds like there are funds available. Any more questions?
Can I just follow up? It would be better, in my opinion, and I'm not saying anything negative about this event, but to have a better look at the full year's projected spending and what events we might project with some extra capacity as opposed to going event by event. But and I understand in this case, it's time sensitive, but just going forward, I hope that's our goal, is to get the plan more coherent as we approve the budget. Thanks.
Yeah, I actually think that's a great idea. I really do. Okay, any more discussion or comment? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or? Okay, then this passes, and again, it would have to be on the June 19th agenda
Correct. We are planning to have it on next week's agenda.
due to the date of the thing. Okay, so now we are going to move to the training, which is the bias sync update. And I believe, Tina, you're going to do a little report, and I think you're introducing our town manager, which we all know.
That's right. Who's going to
So
have the? real
everyone
intro?
knows who he is, so.
From me. Just a reminder to everybody that last meeting, we had a report on Bias Sync, which was selected by the town to provide training for first the police department, which has begun. And then the second two cohorts would include the town staff and also this council. And I believe Greg has an update for us in terms of that process.
Yeah, and really it's more or less repeating what Tina just said. So the police cohort in Bias Sync launched about 6 weeks ago, and things are going well. Every police officer, every employee in the police department has completed an initial assessment, and they're in the process of doing what they call micro learnings. The next two cohorts. So we'd like to launch two cohorts in about a week or so. One would be the rest of the town employees. So that's about another 23 folks amongst the town administration, public works, in the departments here at Town Hall. And then the other cohort would be all elected and appointed officials. So not just this body, but we would invite all the other members of the Planning Commission, the DRB, the Post Commission, the Heritage and Arts Commission to participate as well. So all we really need to do is provide BioSync last names and first names, as well as email addresses. And we're hoping to launch that again, either very late next week, or it would be Monday of the week after that. You'll all be receiving an email from BioSync. We can only use the town's domain, so it'll be coming on the townoftiburon.org domain. So you may want to, and that we'll send an email out in advance and let you know what the launch date will be. But in that time period, you want to make sure that in your junk folder or spam folder, if you're not seeing it, to check there as well. So again, we'll send out an initial email with an introductory message, as well as what the launch date will actually be. That's all I have. Thank you. And I also want to thank Jamila. I had the pleasure of meeting Jamila at a Marin managers meeting several months ago, where she gave us a presentation on the participatory budgeting. So it's good to see you again.
That's fantastic. So I'm gonna go to public comment, then I'll go to questions. Anybody who has questions. Is there any public comment?
Seeing none.
Okay, does anyone have questions for either Tina or our town manager? No? Okay, any members in the, okay, great. So now I am actually going to move on to a report on Juneteenth by Ruben Kalra.
Excellent. If you guys need some flyers or some back there, I think everyone's excited about Juneteenth. It's got a lot of press and publicity so far. I have to thank our fellow Howie Wash for getting out the word on the event, serving as co-chair, which is going to be terrific, even though we're going to miss her since she can't make the event. But and then in the back,
Yeah, I put my foot in my mouth because I didn't recognize Howie. I'm so sorry.
and just like, it's been a good team effort. There've been a couple of maybe former task members who've been pretty active in getting this celebration going, but it's going to be a lot of fun. Highly encourage all the families to come out. Just as a reminder, it's 3:30 to 6:30 on Saturday. If you want to see this amazing band, he's considered one of the world's best drummers, Harold Jones. He's 3:30 to 5:30. And there'll be a lot of fun games, activities, and weather. Right now it looks good. I just don't know how much wind there's going to be. So, but yeah, if you guys have any questions, let us know. We're just appreciative of the council. City of Belvedere stepped up, Tiburon Peninsula Foundation as well, and a lot of the local businesses are helping out. So thanks.
And one of the most important things is our former town council member and vice chair, Noah Griffin, will be singing. So that will be good. But thank you, Howie, also for your work. And I'm sorry, I knew the minute I said something, I was going to leave you out. So sorry about that. Thank you. Do we have any questions about Juneteenth? I'm hoping everyone can go. It should be really fun. So okay, so I think that wraps up our agenda. I have other events on here, but I'm not sure does anyone want to talk about any other events at the moment? No?
We'll have a discussion next time in Diwali over that.
Yes, okay. Next time we will have a discussion. Lee?
I just wanted to ask, I'm just seeing Albert in
I
the,
have one thing, actually. Go ahead.
in the audience. I just wonder if you wanted to give any update about the Asian American event?
Perfect. That would be great. Thank you, Tina.
Yeah, my name's Albert. I was a co-organizer for the Asian American Pacific Heritage Festival last month. And yeah, everything went very well. We had a few hundred people show up. It was a little windy and cloudy, but it didn't rain. So, certainly it could have been worse. And yeah, no, it was great to have the inaugural, the Angel Islands participation. It was really, it was really a great event to have. So thank you again for all your support.
Thank you so much for your work. It was fantastic. I've heard, so thank you. Okay, anything else? So I just want to make sure everybody knows we do not meet in July. So our next meeting will be in August. And Lee has something, our town clerk.
I just wanted to remind you, Chair, that we still need to open the floor for items not on the agenda.
Oh, yes, thank you. Any items not on the agenda that people would like to discuss?
Seeing none.
Okay, great. Thank you. She's our town clerk, but today she's also our town attorney, so you've been added a different, another job description, Lee. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody, and I look forward to seeing you this weekend.